In 2003, the world of poker was forever changed, not by a grizzled pro or a mathematical genius, but by a 27-year-old accountant from Tennessee. His name? Chris Moneymaker. Yes, that's his real name. A name that, after one unforgettable tournament, would become a permanent fixture in poker lore. Armed with little more than online experience, nerves of steel, and an uncanny instinct for the game, Moneymaker entered the most prestigious event in the game, the World Series of Poker Main Event. What followed was one of the greatest underdog stories in sports history. A ticket to a dream. Chris Moneymaker didn't buy his way into the $10,000 WSOP Main Event. He won a $39 satellite tournament on PokerStars, an online qualifier that, at the time, seemed more like a fantasy football entry than a golden ticket to glory. But that $39 turned into a seat at the biggest poker event in the world. At the time, Chris had never even played in a live poker tournament. He was an online player, used to avatars and chat boxes. Still, he packed his bags, flew to Las Vegas, and sat down with the best players in the world. Most people assumed he would be an easy target. Most people were wrong. From awkward beginner to table boss. In the early stages of the tournament, Moneymaker was visibly nervous. He fumbled chips. He stared awkwardly at the action. He looked more like someone trying to survive than someone who could dominate. But beneath the nerves was discipline. He picked his spots. He played tight. He stayed alive. And slowly, steadily, Chris began building a stack. As days passed and thousands of players fell, Moneymaker stayed afloat. He didn't dominate, he endured. Then something shifted. The amateur began to gain confidence. He took more risks. He made bolder moves. He started bluffing, trapping, and value betting like a seasoned pro. By the time the final table was set, Chris Moneymaker wasn't just still in it. He held the chip lead. First blood at the final table. The final table of the 2003 WSOP was stacked with talent, but Moneymaker didn't flinch. The first major hand he played was with 54, a seemingly insignificant holding that would prove decisive. Short-stack David Gray moved all in with a nut-flush draw. Chris, with a small pair, decided to gamble. Another player joined the pot. Tension filled the air, but the board ran clean, and Chris two-pair held. Moneymaker had made a risky but smart call, and it paid off in chips and in fear. The table now knew this accountant was dangerous. Shortly after, Chris found himself in a cooler of a hand against Sam Farha, one of the most charismatic and aggressive pros at the table. Holding 109, Moneymaker flopped top pair. Unfortunately for him, Farha had flopped top set. It was a classic trap. Chris hung in the hand longer than he should have, chasing a miracle. But in the end, he made the right decision, folding before disaster struck. It was a critical moment that highlighted something often missed in poker glory stories. Knowing when to fold can be just as heroic as a winning call. Strategy, grit, and a little luck. The game rolled on. Players fell. Moneymaker picked his spots. He folded when he was beat, raised when he had the edge, and occasionally threw in a bluff to keep people guessing. He wasn't bulletproof. He lost hands. He misread situations, but he adapted, learned, and most importantly, never let a setback rattle him. In a pivotal hand, Chris limped in with key and J and faced a re-raise from Jason Lester holding A and key. The flop came 89-10, a straight for Moneymaker. Lester went all in, and Chris snap-called. The crowd roared, a monster hand at the perfect moment. Jason Lester was eliminated, and Moneymaker gained a massive stack. It was at that point the poker world knew this was no longer a fluke. This was destiny taking shape. The Harrington Gauntlet. With only a few players left standing, the table was tense, the blinds were massive, and each decision could mean a difference of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of dollars. Chris Moneymaker, still riding the momentum of his earlier wins, now had to square off against one of the most respected and composed players in poker, Dan Harrington, a former WSOP Main Event champion himself. Harrington was the embodiment of discipline, tactical, unshakable, and unreadable. Many believed if anyone could neutralize Moneymaker's chaotic momentum, it would be him. But Moneymaker wasn't backing down. In one memorable pot, Chris made a bold move with a marginal hand, Q2. Harrington held a 4, the better hand by a mile. The flop came Q-high, giving Chris top pair, and the turn brought a queen again, improving him to a full house. In a stroke of masterful deception, Moneymaker checked the turn, inducing action from Harrington. When the river blanked, Chris made a large value bet. Dan called with aces up, only to be shown a full house. The look on his face said it all. He'd been outplayed by the amateur. A few hands later, Harrington bet out with a strong flush draw. Chris, holding top pair, refused to let Harrington dictate the hand. He re-raised aggressively, putting Harrington to the test for all his chips. Dan called and missed. Just like that, the former champ was eliminated. The accountant had just taken out the tactician. Chris Moneymaker and Sam Farah were now heads up for the title. Sam, a seasoned high-stakes pro known for his slick image and fearless play, was widely expected to dominate the match. But Moneymaker had other plans. In one particular hand, Moneymaker held K7. Farah had Q9. The flop came 962, giving Farah top pair. Moneymaker had nothing. The turn brought an 8, offering Moneymaker an inside straight draw, but still no made hand. He check-raised Farah's bet, an aggressive and risky play. Farah, intrigued, made the call. The river was a total blank, 3. Moneymaker had missed everything. He had king high, no pair, no draw, nothing. Then came the moment. Without hesitation, Chris moved all in. He shoved his entire stack into the pot on a pure bluff, staring across the table at a world-class opponent with a better hand. Farah went deep into the tank. He smelled something strange. He even guessed aloud that Chris had missed a flush draw. But the size of the bet, the timing, the coldness of Moneymaker's stare, it all added up to danger. And then Farah folded. The room exploded. It was an audacious, beautiful, perfect bluff on the biggest stage in poker. Moneymaker, an amateur, had just outmaneuvered one of the game's most feared pros. It wasn't just about chips. It was about psychology, courage, and absolute conviction. The final hand. The end came swiftly. In what would become the final hand of the tournament, and a moment replayed endlessly in poker highlights for the next 2 decades. Chris was dealt 54. Sam had J10. Both players had hit the board. Sam had top pair. Chris had 2 pair. This was it. The action escalated immediately. Chris led out. Sam raised. Chris re-raised. Sam shoved. Chris called. The cards were flipped. Farah saw the bad news. He was behind and needed a miracle. The turn, 8. The river, 5. It was over. Chris Moneymaker, an online qualifier, a recreational player, an outsider, had just won the 2003 World Series of Poker Main Event. He defeated over 800 players and earned $2.5 million. But more importantly, he triggered a movement that would forever change the game. A legacy beyond the felt. Moneymaker's victory didn't just earn headlines. It launched the poker boom. Dubbed the Moneymaker effect, his win inspired millions around the world to believe that they, too, could play poker from their homes and rise to stardom. Online poker sites exploded in popularity. Live tournaments surged in entries. A new era had begun. Suddenly, poker wasn't just for old-school Las Vegas legends. It was for college kids, office workers, retirees, anyone with a laptop and a dream. Chris became an ambassador for the game, representing the hope and magic of poker's promise, that with the right combination of skill, nerve, and opportunity, anyone could become a champion. The Moneymaker effect. Before 2003, poker was still considered a fringe game, a smoky backroom pastime reserved for professional gamblers, casino regulars, and those willing to endure the grind of small tournaments in dark corners of the world. Televised poker existed, but it was limited. The general public didn't know the difference between a big blind and a backdoor flush draw. Then Chris Moneymaker happened. An ordinary guy. A name out of a movie script. A $2.5 million payout. The idea that anyone, literally anyone, could go from their living room to the grandest stage in poker and beat the best in the world. It shattered the myth of exclusivity. Some thought Chris Moneymaker would be a one-hit wonder, a lightning-in-a-bottle story that would quickly fade. But he proved them wrong. After his win, Chris embraced his role as poker's ambassador. He kept playing, kept learning, and continued competing at a high level. He made multiple deep runs in prestigious tournaments, including a final table at the 2011 NBC National Heads-Up Championship, where he finished runner-up. He traveled the world, representing poker stars and later America's cardroom. He became a fixture on the poker circuit, always approachable, humble, and generous with his time for fans. Chris never pretended to be the best technical player. What made him great was his honesty, his relatability, and the fact that he never forgot where he came from. He played with the heart of a grinder and the grace of a champion. And unlike many who win it all and disappear, Moneymaker used his platform to lift the game up with him. A champion who changed the narrative. Chris Moneymaker didn't invent poker. He didn't solve it. But he changed its narrative. He made poker human. His story reminded everyone that the game isn't just about math and theory and high-stakes bravado. It's about belief, risk, courage, the dream. He wasn't the smartest player in the room. He wasn't the richest. But when the lights were on and the pressure was highest, he made the right plays. He bluffed the best. He called down legends. He didn't choke. He won. That matters. His win showed that poker isn't about who you know. It's about what you do. And that made the game open to the world. Why it still matters. 2 decades later, poker has changed. The game is faster, tougher, more solved. Solvers, data, and charts now guide much of the strategy. But the spirit of poker, what draws players to it, remains rooted in the Moneymaker story. That spirit says, "It could be me." When someone registers for an online satellite or sits down at a local cardroom tournament, that whisper is in the back of their mind. Chris proved it's not a delusion. It's real. Dreams can cash out. Titles can be taken. Legends can be born in a single series of bold decisions. And every time a new amateur makes a deep run, every time a live stream catches an unlikely hero rise from nowhere, people are reminded. It started with a guy named Moneymaker. Final thoughts. Chris Moneymaker didn't just win a tournament. He rewrote the rules of who gets to dream in poker. Moneymaker's story was a thunderclap that echoed through every cardroom, every dorm room, and every corner of the internet. He was the underdog who beat the odds, the amateur who outplayed the pros, the accountant who became a champion, not with luck alone, but with guts, intuition, and perfectly timed courage. His 2003 WSOP victory was more than a fluke. It was a moment of perfect alignment, a fresh face in a fading industry, a story the world wanted to believe, and a reminder that even the smallest stake can become a legend if played right. Poker didn't just grow because of Chris Moneymaker. It believed in itself again. And to this day, every time a recreational player wins a hand they had no business being in, every time a local qualifier stuns the field, and every time someone goes all in chasing the improbable dream, they are walking the path that Chris blazed. In the end, it wasn't just the cards that changed everything. It was the man who played them.